If your legs feel heavy, cold, or tired, it is not because you are getting old. It is because blood is no longer being invited to move the way it was designed to. There is a quiet moment many people experience after 60, often unnoticed at first, when standing in the kitchen or waiting in line, when the legs feel heavier than they once did, slightly swollen, slower to respond, and this sensation is rarely dramatic enough to cause alarm, yet biologically it carries meaning, because circulation does not decline suddenly with age, it fades gradually as daily movement patterns change. Muscles spend more time relaxed than contracting, and gravity is given more influence than resistance, allowing blood to pool gently but persistently in the lower limbs, not as a failure of the heart, but as a shift in how the body is being used. The human vascular system was designed around motion, not comfort, and for most of life, walking, climbing, squatting, and standing up frequently provided constant stimulation to the muscles of the legs, especially the calves, which act as a secondary heart, pushing blood upward through a network of veins equipped with one-way valves. And when this rhythmic squeezing becomes infrequent, those valves are stressed, the veins expand slightly, and blood lingers longer than it should, reducing oxygen delivery and slowing cellular repair, a process that feels like aging but is more accurately described as physiological quietness. As movement decreases, the nervous system adapts as well, sending fewer signals to the muscles, lowering their baseline tone, and over time this reduces the efficiency of circulation even further, because blood flow is not simply a mechanical event, it is regulated by neural input, muscle demand, and chemical signals from the lining of blood vessels, all of which depend on regular activation, and without that activation, tissues become less responsive, more prone to stiffness, and slower to recover from even minor stress. From a clinical standpoint, this is where many people misinterpret the message of their bodies, assuming that heaviness, coldness, or fatigue in the legs is a warning to rest more, when in reality it is often a request for precise, gentle movement, because inactivity does not protect aging tissue, it deprives it, allowing circulation to weaken further and reinforcing the very symptoms people are trying to avoid. What makes this process particularly important to understand is that it unfolds silently, without pain at first, without obvious injury, creating the illusion that nothing can be done, yet biology tells a different story, one in which the vascular system remains remarkably adaptable well into later decades of life, responding not to intensity or force, but to consistency, rhythm, and intention. And when movement is reintroduced thoughtfully, blood flow improves, tissues warm, swelling recedes, and sensation returns, reminding us that many age-related changes are not endpoints, but conversations waiting to be restarted, between muscle and vessel, between gravity and resistance, between the body as it was and the body as it still knows how to be. From a surgical perspective, one of the earliest lessons learned is that circulation in the legs is not driven by the heart alone, because while the heart generates pressure, it is the muscles that determine direction, especially in the lower limbs where blood must travel upward against gravity, and among these muscles, the calves play a role so central that they are often referred to as a secondary heart, not poetically, but mechanically, because each contraction compresses deep veins and propels blood forward through a system of valves designed to prevent backflow. When this muscle pump functions regularly, blood moves efficiently, pressure inside the veins remains balanced, and tissues receive a steady supply of oxygen and nutrients. But when calf muscles are underused, either from prolonged sitting, cautious movement, or fear of falling, that pumping action weakens, allowing blood to linger, increasing venous pressure, and gradually stretching vessel walls, a process that contributes to swelling, discomfort, and a feeling of heaviness that many older adults assume is unavoidable. What is often overlooked is how quickly the body adapts to inactivity, because muscles do not simply lose strength, they lose coordination, timing, and responsiveness, and this affects circulation long before visible weakness appears, as veins rely on precisely timed contractions to move blood efficiently, and without that rhythm, valves that once closed cleanly begin to leak slightly, further slowing return flow and increasing strain on the vascular system. From a biological standpoint, this has downstream effects beyond circulation itself, because reduced blood flow limits oxygen delivery, slows waste removal, and alters the chemical environment of the tissues, leading to stiffness, delayed healing, and increased susceptibility to inflammation, and over time, these changes can influence balance, gait, and confidence, reinforcing a cycle where reduced movement leads to poorer circulation, and poorer circulation discourages movement. Surgical observation reinforces this understanding, because when patients regain mobility after procedures, even modest walking or targeted muscle activation often leads to noticeable improvements in swelling and comfort, demonstrating that the vascular system responds rapidly when the muscle pump is re-engaged, not through force, but through repetition and consistency, highlighting how the body prioritizes function over intensity. This insight reframes aging not as a steady decline, but as a shift in demand, where the body still possesses the mechanisms for circulation, but waits for the signals that tell it those mechanisms are needed, and when those signals are absent, it conserves energy, allowing systems to downregulate in a way that feels like loss, but is often reversible if approached with patience and understanding. Recognizing the calf muscle pump as a central driver of leg circulation restores a sense of agency, because it shifts the focus away from irreversible damage and toward daily habits that quietly shape vascular health, reminding us that the body is less fragile than it appears, and more responsive than we are often led to believe, even in later decades of life. The exercise itself appears almost too simple to be taken seriously, which is precisely why it is so often overlooked, yet controlled heel raises activate one of the most powerful circulatory mechanisms in the human body, because when the heels lift slowly from the ground, the calf muscles contract in a deliberate, sustained manner, compressing the deep veins of the lower leg and pushing blood upward with surprising efficiency. And when the heels lower just as slowly, the muscles lengthen, allowing the veins to refill, creating a rhythmic pump that mimics the natural flow the body relies on during walking. What makes this movement uniquely effective is not just the contraction, but the control, because slow, intentional motion recruits muscle fibers more completely, improves coordination between nerves and muscle tissue, and enhances the responsiveness of the vascular system, allowing blood vessels to dilate and constrict in harmony with demand, a process governed by the endothelium, the delicate inner lining of blood vessels that responds to shear stress created by flowing blood. Research into vascular physiology shows that repeated, gentle increases in blood flow stimulate endothelial health, improving nitric oxide availability, which supports vessel flexibility and efficient circulation, and heel raises, when performed thoughtfully, generate precisely this kind of stimulus without imposing excessive strain on joints or connective tissue, making them particularly suitable for older adults whose tissues benefit more from precision than from force. Beyond circulation, this simple movement influences balance and proprioception, because the calf muscles play a critical role in stabilizing the ankle and maintaining upright posture, and by strengthening these muscles through controlled motion, the body regains confidence in its ability to stand and move safely, reducing the subconscious guarding that often limits activity and further compromises circulation. There is also a neurological dimension to consider, because consistent repetition of a simple, focused movement reinforces neural pathways that may have become underused, improving timing, coordination, and muscle activation patterns, which in turn enhances the efficiency of the circulatory pump, demonstrating how movement, circulation, and nervous system function are inseparable rather than independent systems. What is most compelling from a clinical perspective is how quickly many people notice subtle changes when this exercise is practiced daily: warmer feet, reduced swelling, less heaviness, and an increased sense of stability, not because the body has been pushed to its limits, but because it has been reminded of a function it already knows how to perform, and this reinforces a broader truth about aging physiology, that restoration often begins with reactivating existing systems rather than attempting to build entirely new ones. In this way, controlled heel raises become more than an exercise, they become a dialogue with the body, a deliberate invitation for blood to move, for muscles to engage, and for the vascular system to resume its quiet work, demonstrating that simplicity, when aligned with biology, can be profoundly effective. What determines whether this movement truly restores circulation is not how high the heels lift or how many repetitions are counted, but the quality of attention given to each motion, because the body responds less to force and more to clarity of signal, and slow, deliberate movement sends a stronger and more coherent message to the nervous system than hurried effort ever could. When heel raises are performed with control, the brain receives precise feedback from joints, muscles, and tendons, allowing it to fine-tune balance and coordination, and this sensory information is especially important after 60, when fear of instability often leads to stiffness and reduced range of motion, a protective strategy that ironically increases the risk of poor circulation and falls. Physiologically, intentional pacing allows blood vessels time to respond appropriately because vascular tone is regulated by both mechanical pressure and chemical signals released in response to flow, and when movement is rushed, these systems are less synchronized, reducing the circulatory benefit and increasing strain, whereas slow repetition encourages optimal dilation, efficient venous return, and improved tissue oxygenation without overwhelming the system. Consistency amplifies this effect, because repeated daily activation trains the body to expect movement, gradually increasing baseline muscle tone and restoring confidence in the lower limbs, and over time this reduces swelling, improves temperature regulation in the feet, and supports healthier skin and connective tissue, all of which depend on reliable circulation. There is also a psychological dimension that cannot be separated from the physical outcome, because when individuals feel capable of moving safely, they are more likely to stand, walk, and shift positions throughout the day, unintentionally increasing total movement volume, which further reinforces circulation and creates a positive feedback loop between confidence and physiology. This approach respects the reality of aging tissue, acknowledging that joints, tendons, and vessels benefit from gradual loading rather than sudden demand, and by prioritizing awareness over exertion, the exercise becomes sustainable, reducing the likelihood of pain or injury that might otherwise discourage continued practice. In clinical observation, the individuals who experience the greatest benefit are rarely those who push hardest, but those who practice most patiently, allowing the body time to adapt and re-establish efficient communication between muscles, nerves, and blood vessels. And this reinforces a broader principle in health, that healing is often a process of restoring rhythm rather than chasing intensity. Through this lens, the exercise becomes less about correcting a problem and more about re-educating the body, reminding it how to move blood upward with ease, how to trust its own stability, and how small, intentional actions performed consistently can quietly reshape the internal environment, supporting circulation and overall well-being in a way that feels natural rather than forced. When circulation is approached with urgency, it often leads to frustration, because the body rarely responds well to pressure, especially later in life. But when it is approached with patience and respect, something subtle shifts, as if the body recognizes that it is being listened to rather than commanded. After 60, many people carry an unspoken fear that decline is inevitable, that stiffness, swelling, and weakness are signs of something permanently lost, yet biology does not support this narrative, because the vascular system remains responsive well into older age, adapting not to forceful intervention, but to consistent signals that movement is safe, useful, and expected. A simple daily practice of controlled movement becomes meaningful not because of how much it changes in a single day, but because of what it teaches the body over time, that gravity can be resisted gently, that blood can move upward without strain, and that muscles still have a role to play in supporting circulation, balance, and confidence. This perspective transforms exercise from a task into a form of communication, where each repetition reassures the nervous system, reinforces vascular rhythm, and gradually rebuilds trust between the brain and the lower limbs, a trust that is often eroded by years of cautious movement and fear of discomfort. There is a deeper implication here, because when individuals feel agency over their circulation, they often experience a broader sense of control over their health, becoming more attentive to posture, hydration, breathing, and daily activity, all of which influence blood flow and tissue health in subtle but cumulative ways. From a clinical standpoint, this shift in mindset can be as important as the physical movement itself, because adherence improves when people understand why a simple action matters, and when they feel empowered rather than overwhelmed by complex routines or unrealistic expectations. The body responds to this consistency by improving efficiency rather than capacity, optimizing how blood is distributed, how oxygen is delivered, and how waste is removed, leading to changes that feel less like recovery from illness and more like a return to a familiar baseline of comfort and stability. In this way, a single, well-chosen movement becomes a daily reminder that health is not always restored through dramatic intervention, but through respectful cooperation with the systems already in place, allowing the body to resume its quiet work of circulation, adaptation, and resilience, one intentional movement at a time.